Most people who disappear do so in the shadows. They are alone, they are off the grid, or they are running from something. But it is a rare, terrifying thing for an entire family, a mother, a father, and 2 young children to vanish from the face of the earth in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. No struggle, no scream, and no trail of breadcrumbs. In the summer of 1989, Ronald and Doreen Jack weren't looking for an adventure. They were looking for a way to survive. They were packing for a 2-week job that promised a better winter for their boys. They climbed into a truck with a man they'd known for less than 6 hours. And they drove toward a destination that, as far as the police can tell, didn't exist. 35 years later, the house on Strathcona Avenue is still there. The roads they took are still there. But the Jack family has become a ghost story that northern British Columbia cannot stop telling. To understand the disappearance, you have to understand the state of the Jack family in August of 1989. Prince George is a rugged city, a place built on timber and grit, where the air smells like wood pulp and the winters are unforgiving. Ronnie Jack was 26 years old, a member of the Cheslater Carrier Nation. He was a man used to hard physical labour, but a back injury had sidelined him. In a town like Prince George, if you can't use your back, your options disappear quickly. He and his wife, Doreen, were living on welfare in a small rented house. They had 2 boys, 9-year-old Russell and 4-year-old Ryan. Money was tight, the kind of tight where you count every penny for the upcoming school year. They weren't looking to leave. They were rooted there. Their furniture, their children's school records, their entire world was inside that house. They were just waiting for a break. On the night of August 1st, 1989, Ronnie walked a few blocks to the First Litre Pub. It was a local spot, a place to escape the heat of a stagnant summer evening. Sometime during that night, Ronnie struck up a conversation with a stranger. Witnesses would later describe a man who commanded the room. A white male, 6'6", nearly 270 pounds. He had reddish-brown hair, a full beard, and was wearing a red checkered work shirt with a blue nylon jacket. But it was his boots that stood out. Work boots with distinctive leather fringes over the toes. This man offered Ronnie a miracle. He claimed he ran a logging camp out near Clucoles Lake. He needed a man for bucking logs. He needed a woman for the camp kitchen, and he even promised daycare for the boys. It was the perfect setup. 10 days of work to clear their debts and get the boys ready for school. There was only one catch. The job started immediately. Tonight. At 11:16 p.m, Ronnie Jack returned home. The stranger followed him in a dark-coloured 4x4 pickup truck. Imagine the scene. It's late. The boys should be sleeping. Suddenly, Ronnie is home with a burst of frantic, hopeful energy. He tells Doreen to pack, but Ronnie was a responsible man. He sat at his kitchen table and made his calls. He called his brother. Then, at 1:21 a.m, he called his mother, Mabel. He told her, "We'll be gone about 10 days. We'll be back before school starts." Then, he said something that now feels like a chilling premonition. He told her, "If we aren't back by then, come looking for us." At 1:30 a.m, the neighbours at 2116 Strathcona Avenue watched through their windows. They saw the family moving back and forth from the front door to the dark truck. They weren't moving furniture. They were packing light, sleeping bags, a few clothes, the essentials for a week in the woods. Ronnie, Doreen, and the 2 young boys piled into that truck with a man they had met just hours prior. The engine turned over. The taillights faded as the truck pulled away from the curb. And the Jack family drove toward Highway 16. They haven't been seen since. By August 15th, the silence began to feel heavy. When a family of 4 goes missing, the world doesn't notice all at once. It happens in stages. It starts with a phone that rings and rings in an empty house. It continues when the mail begins to pile up in the box. And the lawn, once maintained, begins to grow ragged. For Ronnie's mother, Mabel, the worry wasn't a slow build. It was a sudden, sharp realization. Ronnie was a man of his word. On her end of the line, there was nothing but a dial tone. When the police finally entered the house on Strathcona Avenue in late August, they didn't find a crime scene. They found a time capsule. In a typical disappearance, you look for signs of a struggle. There was none of that. Instead, the investigators found something more unsettling. A life left mid-sentence. The boys' school clothes were still folded in their drawers. The kitchen table where Ronnie had made his last phone calls stood exactly where it had always been. Most importantly, the boys' school records were still there. In 1989, you didn't move your family without those papers. The house was a portrait of a family that fully believed they were coming home. The investigation turned towards the job offer. The RCMP canvassed every logging operation in the region. They checked the payrolls. They spoke to the foreman who had been working the bush that summer. The result was a total void. There was no record of a man matching the stranger's description. No daycare facility in the middle of the woods. No kitchen job for Doreen. The work opportunity Ronnie had been so excited about was a total fabrication. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a calculated, multi-hour performance. The man had gone to a pub, selected a vulnerable family, and waited while they packed. He didn't just want Ronnie or Doreen. He wanted the whole family. The trail was already cold, but an RCMP blunder made it frozen. On September 7th, 1989, a month after the disappearance, the RCMP incorrectly reported that the family had been found safe. For a brief, tragic window of time, the investigation was closed. The public stopped looking. It was a bureaucratic error that lasted long enough for the trail to go completely cold. By the time they realized the mistake, the stranger had been given an additional month to vanish. For nearly 7 years, the file on the Jack family sat on a shelf, growing thicker with reports, but thinner on hope. Then, on a cold Sunday morning in January 1996, the silence was broken. At 8:33 a.m., a phone rang at the Vanderhoof RCMP detachment. When the officer picked up, they didn't hear a plea for help or a long-winded confession. They heard a man's voice, hurried, perhaps looking over his shoulder. The caller said exactly 10 words. The Jack family are buried in the south end of a ranch. Then, the line went dead. The call lasted only 10 seconds. In the world of investigations, 10 seconds is an eternity and a heartbeat, all at once. Police traced the signal to a home in the Saiku's First Nation community of Stony Creek, but the phone was in a crowded room, at a party that had lasted all night. No one claimed the call. No one remembered using the phone. The lead, like the truck in 1989, vanished into the air. Fast forward to 2019. Forensic technology had finally caught up to the mystery. Investigators returned to the land south of Vanderhoof, not looking for witnesses anymore, but for anomalies in the soil. They brought in ground-penetrating radar and heavy machinery. For days, the machines groaned as they moved tons of dirt, searching for the outline of a burial, for a piece of 1980s clothing, or the metal frame of a suitcase. They found Nothing. This is the psychological toll of the Jack case. Every few years, a definitive tip arrives. A map is drawn on a napkin. A psychic has a vision. A deathbed confession is whispered in a bar. Each time, the family prepares themselves for the worst, which in this case would be the mercy of the truth. And each time, the earth remains stubbornly silent. The most heart-wrenching artifacts of this case aren't the police files, but the age-progressed photos. Forensic artists have taken the soft, rounded faces of 9-year-old Russell and 4-year-old Ryan and projected them into adulthood. They show us what two Indigenous men in their 40s might look like today. They have strong jaws, perhaps a few lines around the eyes, from working in the sun. But these men do not exist. The photos are a haunting reminder of the life stolen. If the boys are gone, they were denied the right to become the men in those photos. But the reality is much darker. When an entire family is taken, there is no one left to tell the story. There is no survivor to carry the memory. There is only the void. Today, the Jack family disappearance is a grim cornerstone of the Highway of Tears. It stands as a painful example of how Indigenous families in the North have been historically underserved by the systems meant to protect them. Critics argue that there is a double standard in how we search for the missing. They suggest that if a wealthy, non-Indigenous family of 4 had vanished from a suburb in 1989, the response would have been instantaneous. Every helicopter, every infrared camera, every national news outlet would have been deployed within 48 hours. But for the Jacks, the benefit of the doubt given to the stranger only served to give him a 35-year head start. Their case highlights a systemic silence that many Indigenous communities are still fighting to break today. The mystery of the Jack family doesn't end with a twist. It ends with a question that stays with you long after the screen goes black. Somewhere in the vast wooded interior of British Columbia, there is a location that holds the answer. It might be the floor of a shallow ravine, or the corner of a ranch that hasn't been grazed in decades. Somewhere, there is a dark-coloured 4x4 pickup truck that was once driven by a man with reddish-brown hair. If that man is alive, he is likely in his 70s now. He has lived 35 years with the knowledge of what happened on that drive toward Klukul's Lake. And as long as he stays silent, the Jack family remains exactly where they were, at 1:30 a.m. on August 2nd, 1989, driving down a dark highway into a future that never arrived. The Jack family didn't just disappear. They were taken from a community that is still waiting for answers. 35 years is a long time to keep a secret. If you have any information regarding Ronald, Doreen, Russell, or Ryan Jack, no matter how small the detail, please contact the Prince George RCMP or Crime Stoppers. If you believe this story needs to be remembered, please share this video. Every view is another set of eyes on these faces, and another chance for the truth to surface. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.